Welcome, deep divers, to the very first deep dive of the Ultradian Pulse. I'm Jonathan, your host, and honestly, I'm really excited to get started on this journey with you all. Our whole mission here is, well, take a really comprehensive look into the science behind attention and focus. We want to arm you with the insights you need to, beat mental fatigue, unlock that potential for deep work, and finally get into that state we call flow. We all feel it these days, right? That sort of background hum of productivity, anxiety, the constant fight for focus when distractions are everywhere. We're always chasing the latest hacks. But maybe the real answer lies deeper in understanding our own biology, a history we've kind of forgotten. So today, we're really laying the foundation. We're going way back to the beginning, exploring the revolutionary discovery of the human biological clock. We'll cover the basics of big 24-hour circadian rhythm, the sleep-wake cycle 1, and also the faster ultradian rhythms. Those are the ones that really control our focus and energy moment to moment, and believe me, we'll be diving much deeper into those later on. And guiding us through all this fascinating science and history, I'm thrilled to have our resident expert with us. She brings such scientific precision and insight to this whole topic. It's fantastic to have you here.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's great to be here. And I'm really keen to help everyone listening grasp this foundational science. You're absolutely right. The real journey doesn't start with, the newest app or some productivity guru. It starts with these fundamental rhythms that basically run everything in our bodies. Understanding where it all began is truly the crucial first step to managing our energy and focus today, especially with all the digital demands. It's like finding the body's original instruction manual.
So let's dive in then. For centuries, millennia even, these really basic questions: why do we sleep? Why do we get tired? Why does our energy go up and down? They were just huge mysteries. I mean, think about it. 2,000 years where fatigue was explained by, pure speculation. Some of it sounded nice, poetic even, but you couldn't actually prove any of it. How did people even start trying to make sense of it back then?
It's true. For a very long time, understanding sleep and fatigue was really more about folklore and philosophy than science, simply because the tools to investigate empirically just didn't exist. We have some fascinating, quite imaginative examples of these early theories. Take Alcmaeon of Croton, a Greek physician back in the 6th century BC. He suggested sleep was caused simply by a withdrawal of blood into the veins.
Withdrawal of blood, so blood just leaves the brain or something.
Kind of, yeah. You can imagine him maybe seeing someone look pale or tired and just making that connection. A mechanical idea, but like you said, totally untestable. You couldn't see inside to check.
Right. Pure guesswork based on observation. What else did they come up with?
Well, then you had Heraclitus, the philosopher. He was a bit more poetic about it. He described sleep as an extinguishing of our inner fire.
An inner fire. Okay, that sounds cool, but yeah, not very scientific.
Exactly. It's a beautiful metaphor. Life's flame dimming down, but it's completely outside anything you could test. Even much later, the famous Roman physician Galen, he tried to be more systematic. He thought the sleep-wake cycle was just, quote, the 2 phases of cardiac pulsation. He was trying to link it to something observable, the heartbeat.
Okay, that seems a bit closer, maybe. Linking it to the heart.
Closer, but still missing the crucial piece, data. There was no evidence that heart rate caused sleep or wakefulness. These were all attempts, some quite profound, to understand a basic biological process, but they all lacked the means to actually observe, measure, or test their ideas directly. They were seeing things on the surface and, jumping to some pretty big conclusions. Nathaniel Kleitman, who became a huge figure in sleep research later on, he summed it up perfectly. He pointed out that almost all these old theories, no matter how different they seemed, boiled down to a shifting of the blood. Either too much blood or too little blood in some part of the body, usually the brain.
So it always came back to blood flow, more or less.
Pretty much. And Henri Piron, another key figure, really hit the nail on the head about the problem. He said the so-called evidence back then was mostly just analogies, coincidences, and studies of comatose states.
Wait, comatose states? They were studying people in comas to understand normal sleep.
Yes, exactly. Which, as Piron pointed out, is a massive flaw. It's like trying to understand how a healthy engine runs by only looking at wrecked cars. He called it a science built on metaphor. That phrase really captures it.
A science built on metaphor. Wow, that really highlights how far they were from understanding the actual physiology. They were stuck with external observations. But surely, even before measuring humans directly, there must have been clues in nature, rhythmic patterns, maybe in plants. Did anything hint at an internal clock?
Oh, definitely. There's a really interesting botanical lineage, as some call it, to the idea of a biological clock. It goes back quite a way. In the 13th century, you had Albert the Great, a German philosopher and friar, who actually declared that plants slept like humans.
Slept like humans.
Really? Well, not in a scientific sense, obviously. But he saw the leaves folding and unfolding and made that connection. It was more of an intuitive leap, setting a kind of philosophical stage, linking plant and human rhythms, even if it was superficial. But then things got much more scientific in the 18th century with Jean-Jacques d'Autour de Méran. He was a French astronomer, actually. He did some really systematic studies for the time. He focused on the sensitive plant, Mimosa pudica, the one that snaps shut when you touch it. It also opens its leaves in the day and folds them at night.
Yeah, I think I know the one. So what did he do?
Well, the crucial experiment was when he put these plants in total darkness for days on end.
Okay.
And they still kept opening and closing on their usual daily schedule, even without the sun as a cue.
Whoa. So it wasn't just reacting to light.
Exactly. That was huge. It strongly suggested the plant had some kind of internal mechanism, an intrinsic timer driving its rhythm. It was probably the first real empirical evidence for an internal timekeeper, a real breakthrough moment.
That sounds like they were right on the cusp of figuring it out.
Mm.
So why did this path become a scientific dead end, as you put it earlier? It seems so direct.
It was promising, and it definitely fascinated researchers for a while. But as science became more rigorous in the 19th century, people started asking harder questions. Did plants really sleep like animals do, physiologically speaking? Henri Piron, whom we mentioned earlier, eventually concluded quite definitively that there are no states of sleep in plants, despite appearances. He argued the similarity was just superficial analogy.
So the leaves folding looked like sleep, but the underlying biology was totally different.
Precisely. Even prominent biologists like Weismann agreed, saying the resemblance was entirely external, superficial. The internal mechanisms just weren't the same as animal sleep, which involves complex brain activity. And actually, the systematic dismantling of the plant sleep idea was really important. It forced researchers to stop relying on these poetic metaphors and surface similarities. They had to start looking for actual physiological and neurological mechanisms in animals and humans. It pushed them away from comparing leaf movements to investigating things like body temperature, heart rate, brain function. It made the science much more focused and ultimately more productive.
Right. It cleared the way for a different kind of investigation. And this is where it gets really interesting, isn't it? After all that speculation and the detour into botany, 1842 arrives. Everything changes. Enter Augustus Gierse. This feels like the real turning point.
Yes, 1842 is absolutely pivotal. Augustus Gierse, a German physician, did something that sounds simple now but was radical then. He stopped just thinking and started measuring. Think about it. For 2 millennia, the main tools were analogy, metaphor, abstract ideas. In 1842, the tool became a thermometer.
A thermometer, that's it.
That's it. But that simple instrument, used systematically, shattered centuries of speculation with cold, hard data. And that, right there, is the birth of the scientific study of human performance and biological rhythms. And this shift from just observing and describing qualitatively to actually measuring quantitatively was profound. It wasn't just about numbers, it was this fundamental realization that our biology follows discoverable, quantifiable laws, not just mysterious whims. It opened the door to understanding our own bodies in a way that just wasn't possible before. We moved from asking why in a philosophical sense to how in a physiological sense.
Okay, so Gierse basically provided the first real measurable proof that our bodies aren't random, they run on a schedule. An internal one.
Exactly, a predictable schedule. It means, for you listening, that your energy levels aren't just fluctuating randomly. There's a blueprint, even if you're not consciously aware of it. That's a massive shift in thinking, especially for managing energy today.
Let's zoom in on Gierse himself then. You mentioned he's often misnamed, even by later scientists. What do we actually know about Augustus Gierse, the person?
Right, yes. Sometimes you see him called Johann Gierse, but his correct name was Augustus. He was a German physician born in Westphalia in 1817. He studied at the University of Halle, which was quite prestigious. He got a really thorough medical education, anatomy, clinics, even obstetrics. Seems like he was a very dedicated student. He even wrote about being grateful to his teachers, saying he'd always gratefully pursue the merits of these men in my mind. Suggests a serious, methodical person. And his 1842 dissertation, the key work here, actually won a prize. Its title translates to something like, what is the nature of organic heat in inflamed parts of the body?
Organic heat in inflamed parts. So he wasn't actually looking for daily rhythms initially.
Not specifically as we think of them now, no. He was interested in body heat, more broadly, in different conditions. But his very meticulous approach, his commitment to measurement, led him straight to documenting the daily rhythm as part of that larger investigation.
Okay, so what was the scientific climate like right before he did this work? What were the dominant ideas about sleep and daily changes that he was sort of pushing against, even implicitly?
Well, as we discussed, it was still largely dominated by those older speculative ideas. The blood-shifting theories, the inner fire metaphors, they were still around, though maybe fading a bit. Kleitman's summary about shifting of the blood being the common theme was pretty accurate for the time just before Geer's. Even attempts to be more scientific, like Hartley's doctrine of vibrations back in 1748, were still quite theoretical, not based on direct measurement of these daily patterns. The really big question, the methodological hurdle, was, could you actually study these daily changes quantitatively? Could you move beyond speculation? Victor Henry's later quote about unmeasurable things belonging to metaphysics really captures that tension. Researchers weren't necessarily thinking biological rhythms as a concept yet. They were just trying to document predictable physiological patterns, if any existed. Geer's massive contribution was realizing, hey, I can measure this daily variation. And he applied rigorous methods, just like you would to study physics or chemistry. That was the shift, applying quantitative science to these subtle daily bodily changes. A truly modern step.
Right. And that leads us directly to his experiment. He was looking at organic heat generally, but then made the specific decision to track how animal heat changes at different times of the day by measuring himself. How exactly did he do that?
It was remarkably systematic for the 1840s. He basically turned himself into the laboratory. Over several days in June 1842, he took his own temperature under his tongue at regular intervals throughout each 24-hour period.
Under the tongue. Okay. And he did this repeatedly?
Yes, consistently, multiple times a day after day, logging everything meticulously. This kind of self-experimentation with that level of repetition and recording was pretty cutting edge and, frankly, quite brave for the time. If we look at his actual data table, say from June 22nd, 1842, you see the detail. Around 6:30 a.m., his temperature was 29.4 degrees Reaumur.
Reaumur. What's that in familiar terms?
Good question. The Reaumur scale was common in German science then. 29.4 degrees R is about 36.8 degrees Celsius or 98.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Pretty normal morning temperature.
Okay, and later in the day?
By 2 p.m., after he'd eaten and been active, it rose to 30.10 degrees R. That's around 37.6 degrees C or 99.7 degrees Fahrenheit. A clear increase. And he wasn't just tracking temperature, he also recorded his pulse rate alongside it. He saw that go up too, maybe from 58 beats per minute in the morning to 74 after activity.
So he saw both temperature and pulse changing predictably.
He recorded both, yes, but his main focus and conclusion were about the temperature pattern. He observed this rise and fall consistently over multiple days. It wasn't random. It was a clear, predictable daily wave.
So after collecting all this careful data on himself, what did Geer's actually conclude? He must have seen that wave very clearly.
Oh, absolutely. His conclusion was direct and based firmly on his measurements. He stated clearly that during the nighttime, animal heat is lower than during the afternoon by almost half degree R.
Half a degree Reaumur, so about 0.6 Celsius or 1 degree Fahrenheit difference.
Exactly, a small but consistent difference. And that was it, the first empirical measured documentation of the daily temperature rhythm in humans. Not a guess, a measured fact. Now, how did he explain why this happened? He interpreted it through the lens of 1840s physiology, which was quite mechanical. He pointed to three main factors.
Okay, what were they?
First, muscular activity. He argued that since we move around more during the day, muscles are exerted much more, generating more heat. Makes intuitive sense, right? More work, more heat.
Yeah, that seems logical enough for the time.
Second, mental and sensory function. He thought that because our senses, mind, and emotions rest during sleep, this contributes to the body cooling down at night. So not just physical rest, but mental rest, too.
Interesting. So brain activity contributing to heat as well?
That was his implication. And third, vascular system changes. He observed that blood flow and heart activity seemed lower at night. He contrasted this with what he called a slightly febrile state during the day, meaning slightly feverish, or just warmer and more active internally. He put it all together in a neat theory. Since body heat seems to originate from all vital functions, and those functions slow down at night, temperature naturally drops. It was a logical, mechanical explanation based on his observations.
A complete picture based on the science of his day. Even if he wasn't thinking circadian rhythm, he nailed the observation and gave the first data-driven explanation.
Precisely. For him, it was part of understanding body heat. For us, looking back, it's the cornerstone of scientific chronobiology, the first hard data showing our internal world runs on a daily clock.
It's amazing how that simple act, measure, record, repeat could be so revolutionary. You mentioned he was obscure for a while, but later researchers recognized him.
That's right. His work didn't immediately shake the scientific world. Speculation was still pretty common. But his meticulous documentation was there, waiting. Decades later, people like Henri Piron, in his massive 1913 review of sleep research, specifically pointed to Gears's 1842 study as the first systematic one on daily temperature variation.
So Piron rediscovered him, essentially.
He certainly highlighted its significance. And then Nathaniel Kleitman, in his hugely influential 1963 book, confirmed it, explicitly crediting Piron for identifying Gears's 1842 work as the starting point for systematic study. It took these later giants to really cement his place in history. But Gears's real legacy, beyond the finding itself, was his absolute commitment to empirical measurement. He actually wrote something quite powerful in his dissertation preface.
Oh, yeah? What did he say?
He said, regarding the question he was studying, let it be investigated by more accurately performed experiments. As a result, such experiments take first place.
Experiments take first place.
Oh.
Wow, that's a declaration of independence from speculation, isn't it?
It really is. It's a clear break. He was saying, enough talk, let's measure. And by doing that, with just a thermometer and careful notes, he provided the foundation for chronobiology. He proved these internal fluctuations weren't just feelings. They were quantifiable, analyzable facts.
And that's the pivot. That simple statement he made. To know how animal heat changes at different times of the day, I made these observations on myself. 17 words, roughly, that basically launched the science of human performance away from folklore and into physics. He couldn't have known he was unlocking circadian rhythms, but his dedication to just observing and measuring laid all the groundwork. It reminds us that those energy shifts you feel aren't random. They follow a rhythm. Gears was the first to scientifically document. So Gears gives us the temperature rhythm, one clear beat. But that just opens up more questions, right? Is temperature doing its own thing, or is the whole body in sync? What happened next?
The next huge leap came just 9 years later, in 1851, with F. von Behrensprung, another German researcher.
Behrensprung. Okay. What was his story?
He was born in Berlin in 1822, apparently had an early love for natural sciences. He got extensive medical training, interestingly, also studying internal medicine in Halle, the same university as Gears.
Huh. Small world. Or at least small scientific world back then.
It seems so. And Behrensprung wasn't just an academic. He served as a physician during really bad typhus and cholera outbreaks. His biographer notes he had to basically run the hospital clinic alone for a time because colleagues got sick. That kind of intense frontline experience with human physiology likely shaped his thinking. It was around this time, inspired by people like Geuss, that he started using temperature measurements in his medical work. Critically, his biographer explicitly states he introduced these measurements following the example of the deceased Dr. Gears.
So he knew Gears's work and consciously built on it.
Yes, it seems clear he did. Behrensprung realized Gears's temperature finding might not be an isolated thing. He suspected it could be part of a much larger coordinated system within the body. He was looking for the whole orchestra, not just the drum beat.
That's a key shift in thinking. Moving from documenting a rhythm to looking for coordinated rhythms. What was the scientific thinking that allowed him to even frame that question?
Well, the drive towards quantitative measurement was growing stronger. That idea, remember, that unmeasurable things were metaphysics, not physiology. That pushed scientists to look for quantifiable links between systems. Behrensprung's big 1851 study, its title translates to Investigations on the Temperature Conditions of the Fetus and the Adult Human in Healthy and Sick States, was designed specifically to tackle this coordination question. He wasn't just asking if rhythms exist, but how they work together. Was temperature fluctuating on its own, or did it reflect, as he suspected, a coordinated biological system operating according to a unified internal clock? He was hunting for that central timekeeper.
And his study was much bigger than Gears's self-experiment, right? What made his methodology so rigorous and groundbreaking?
Oh, vastly more comprehensive. His methodology was extraordinary for the time. First, he used a multi-subject design, moving way beyond just himself. He studied people across the whole age range, infants, children, adults. He even did longitudinal studies on 20 newborns, tracking their temperature daily for extended periods. This gave his findings a universality Gears's couldn't have.
So, proving it wasn't just one person's quirk.
Exactly. But the really crucial innovation, the game changer, was his dual parameter monitoring. This is key. Behrensprung didn't just measure temperature. He simultaneously tracked both body temperature and heart rate over 24-hour periods.
Ah, so measuring two different systems at the same time.
Precisely. This was the first systematic comparison of multiple physiological rhythms. It allowed him to look for synchronization, for that potential coordination. And on top of that, he used pretty comprehensive environmental controls. He knew outside factors could mess with the data. He studied people on specific diets, like patients eating just soup and white bread. He considered different states like menstruation, pregnancy. He looked at factors like climate, exercise, even blood loss. By trying to control or account for these variables, he could better isolate the intrinsic biological rhythm.
Wow, that's incredibly thorough for the 1850s.
Oh.
Okay, so after all that painstaking work tracking temperature and heart rate and all these people under controlled conditions, what did he find? What was this complete parallelism?
His data revealed something striking. He described it as complete parallelism between the average values of temperature and pulse. It wasn't just a loose association, it was tight synchrony. He stated it very clearly. The pulse rate rises and falls with temperature, and its fluctuations follow the same double wave in which the latter moves.
The same double wave. What exactly did that pattern look like?
Right, it wasn't just a simple single peak and trough over 24 hours. He identified a more complex pattern, a double wave. Typically, there was a morning peak around 11 a.m. where both temperature and pulse rose together. He gave examples like pulse 62.5, temperature 29.88 degrees R, which is about 37.3 degrees C or 99.1 degrees Fahrenheit. Then a slight dip around midday, followed by an evening peak, usually the highest point, around 6 or 7 p.m. For instance, pulse hitting 74.4, temperature 30.1 degrees R, that's 37.6 degrees C or 99.7 degrees Fahrenheit. And then both declined through the night, reaching their lowest point together around 4 a.m. during sleep. Maybe pulse down to 56, temperature 29.0 degrees R, which is 36.25 degrees C or 97.25 degrees F.
So two peaks and two troughs, perfectly aligned between heart rate and temperature.
Right.
They were marching in lockstep.
Exactly. Lockstep is a great way to put it. When you visualize his data, this synchronized double wave becomes incredibly clear. It's this undulating, coordinated pattern that really shows how tightly linked these systems are. It's not just coincidence, it's a physiological duet.
That double wave is fascinating. It suggests our energy isn't just one big up and down, but has these finer fluctuations within the day. That midday dip he saw. Maybe that's related to the post-lunch slump people talk about.
It's certainly tempting to connect it. His work definitely showed our systems are designed for fluctuation, not constant high output. That dip isn't necessarily a failure. It's part of the natural rhythm he uncovered.
And this wasn't just a coincidence to him, right? He saw something fundamental here about how our bodies are organized.
Absolutely. This was his revolutionary insight, the idea of endogenous coordination. He concluded these synchronized rhythms were typical, meaning normal and expected, and crucially, although they can be modified by a change in lifestyle, they cannot be abolished.
Cannot be abolished. So deep down, the rhythm persists.
That was his assertion. It meant these patterns weren't just passive reactions to meals or activity or sunlight. They were being driven by something internal, an intrinsic timing system within the body itself. He strongly suspected a central biological timekeeper was coordinating everything. He'd found the conductor. This completely shifted the paradigm. It moved the science from thinking about isolated rhythms to understanding coordinated systems, all governed by a unified biological clock. And the fact he saw this across different ages suggested it was a fundamental, universal feature of being human. Kleitman later confirmed Behrensprung's key finding, noting his documentation of the coincidence of maxima and minima for both temperature and heart rate. Behrensprung really provided the conceptual framework for modern chronobiology, the idea of an intrinsic, coordinated, multi-system clock. His own words capture it so well. A further, very remarkable result is the complete parallelism between the average values of temperature and pulse. The pulse rate rises and falls with temperature, and its fluctuations follow the same double wave in which the latter moves. That just perfectly sums up the discovery of our body's internal symphony.
Okay, so now we have Gears showing the basic 24-hour temperature rhythm, and Behrensprung revealing that multiple systems like temperature and heart rate dance together in perfect synchrony, following this double wave. The biological clock is looking pretty robust, pretty powerful, but, humans. We always want to test the limits. Did anyone try to, deliberately break the clock? Could willpower overcome this internal rhythm?
That is exactly the question Ugolino Musso tackled in 1887. He was an Italian physiologist, and he set out to do something incredibly bold, almost defiant. His goal, in his own words, was to displace the maximum and minimum of his temperature. Basically, could he force his body's high and low points to happen at different times?
So actively try to reprogram his own clock.
Precisely. And he knew he was pushing against established findings. He even cited earlier work by a researcher named Jurgensen, who had shown these temperature rhythms persisted even if someone stayed completely still and fasted, suggesting they weren't just due to activity or meals. Mosso highlighted Jurgensen's finding that even with immobility and fasting, the nighttime temperature drop and daytime rise still happened. So Mosso wasn't naive. He knew he was directly challenging this idea of an unshakable internal rhythm. It was a direct scientific confrontation.
That takes some serious commitment, basically betting against your own fundamental biology. How did he set up this 4-day war against the clock, as you called it? What was the plan?
His plan was, as you said, simple but brutal. He decided to completely reverse his occupations so as to work only at night and sleep during the day. A total inversion of his life schedule.
Just flip day and night completely.
Exactly, and he tried to be scientifically rigorous about it. He controlled his diet carefully, shifting his meals to 11 p.m. and 6 a.m., keeping the food quantity the same, specifically to eliminate the influence of food on his temperature. For measurements, he used a precise rectal thermometer considered more accurate for core body temp-taking readings regularly, even during his nighttime work hours. He meticulously plotted everything against a baseline temperature so he could see any changes day by day.
So he tried to isolate the schedule change as the only variable.
As much as possible for a self-experiment, yes. Interestingly, he was also very aware of the limitations. He acknowledged that for absolute value, he really should have stayed at complete rest, like Jurgensen's subjects, without doing any mental work. But he felt this intense self-experiment, even with its flaws, was a necessary first step to see if willpower could, in fact, override biology. He knew it was a huge challenge he was undertaking.
Okay, the stage is set. Mosso versus his biological clock. What happened when he actually tried to live this inverted life? This sounds like it could get messy.
Messy is an understatement. It was a dramatic physiological breakdown meticulously documented by Mosso himself over 4 intense days in April 1885. His body essentially staged a revolt. His normal temperature, which usually cycled nicely between about 36.3 degrees C, 97.3 degrees low, and 36.9 degrees C, 98.4 degrees high, started going haywire almost immediately. On day 1, there was initial resistance. His temperature stayed low until about 9 a.m., like normal. But then, after eating and working through the night, it spiked up to 37.1 degrees C, 98.8 degrees F, and stayed high, hitting 37.2 degrees C, 99.0 degrees in the evening. These were his usual afternoon levels, now happening at the wrong time. The clock was fighting back.
So his body was trying to stick to its old schedule despite his efforts.
It seemed like it. Then day 2, things got worse. He literally fell asleep at his desk around 4 a.m., couldn't fight his natural sleep drive. His temperature shot up to 37.3 degrees C, 99.1 degrees by 8:30 a.m., and he woke up with a headache. Clear signs of physiological stress setting in.
Headache, falling asleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, his body was not happy.
Day 3 saw a continued breakdown. He felt drowsy again around 5 a.m., wanting to sleep, but his temperature was already up at 37.1 degrees C. By 7:20 a.m., it soared to 37.5 degrees, 99.5 degrees Celsius, way above his normal peak. His body was in, as you said, open rebellion. The systems were becoming disorganized.
Okay, this is building towards something bad. I can feel it. Day 4.
Day 4 was the crisis point. His temperature climbed to a worrying 37.8 degrees C, 100.0 degrees after a visit to the hospital. That's officially a low-grade fever. Even his lowest temperature that evening, 36.8 degrees C, 98.2 degrees F, was higher than his normal afternoon peak.
A fever, just from changing his schedule for 4 days.
Yes. This clear febrile state, as he called it, this sign of illness, forced him to stop the experiment immediately. It was too dangerous to continue. If you look at the actual temperature curve he plotted, you can see it visually, this steady climb from a normal rhythm into chaotic, feverish territory. His log for April 15th shows 37.1 degrees C at 1 a.m., still 37.1 degrees C at 6 a.m. after reading, then bam, 37.8 degrees C at 11 a.m. after being out. His body was screaming stop.
Wow, that is incredibly dramatic. His own body forced him to quit. So, faced with this undeniable evidence, this fever, what did Mosso himself conclude from this whole ordeal?
His conclusions were remarkably honest and insightful, given he'd essentially lost his battle. First, he admitted it was only an apparent inversion. He realized he hadn't truly flipped the fundamental rhythm. He'd just thrown a chaotic, stressful pattern on top of it. He couldn't force a stable reversal.
So he acknowledged he failed to actually reprogram the clock.
Yes. He then carefully documented the physiological cost. He wrote explicitly that his temperature continuously increased and presented a febrile state. He recognized this wasn't just feeling bad, it was a measurable, dangerous physiological change caused by fighting his natural schedule. And his final conclusion is the most powerful, the big takeaway. This experiment shows that one cannot invert the wakeful period with impunity. He went on to say, little by little, an abnormal excitation of my nervous system occurred and the temperature of my body rose progressively until it reached limits which can be called feverish and which forced me to interrupt the experiment.
Cannot invert with impunity. That says it all, doesn't it? Biology has rules, and there are consequences for breaking them.
Exactly. He understood that ignoring these fundamental rhythms wasn't just difficult, it was physiologically harmful. Willpower had its limits against basic biology.
So technically a failed experiment for Maso personally, but scientifically a huge success because it proved the strength of the internal clock. That fever wasn't failure, it was biological evidence. For us today, listening to this, it's such a stark warning against that whole push through the pain, sleep is for the weak mentality. There's a real physiological cost. What was the impact of Maso's dramatic experiment on the science that followed?
It had a profound impact, precisely because it demonstrated the clock's resilience so dramatically. It provided the first hard empirical proof that these 24-hour rhythms aren't just habits, they are deep-seated physiological constraints. That fever was the body's undeniable verdict, a non-negotiable breaking point. As he recorded, the abnormal excitation and progressive temperature rise showed a system under duress, forced into a pathological state. His work echoed down the years. Later researchers, especially Nathaniel Kleitman again, pointed to Maso's experiment as key evidence for just how robust these biological rhythms are, how strongly they resist artificial manipulation.
So Kleitman saw it as proof of the clock's power.
Yes. Now, it's important to note that later studies, conducted over much longer periods, like 5 or 6 weeks, not days, did eventually show that a full inversion of rhythms is possible. The body can adapt slowly.
Okay, so it's not impossible, just very difficult and slow.
Exactly. But Maso's intense short-term ordeal became a landmark demonstration of the clock's powerful resistance to rapid change. It highlighted the immediate, significant physiological cost of trying to force it. Adaptation takes time and happens under protest. And that phrase, cannot invert with impunity, really became symbolic. It captures the core truth. Our internal clocks aren't gentle suggestions. They're fundamental biological requirements. Ignoring them has consequences. It's a law written into our physiology.
Okay, let's bring all these threads together now. We've journeyed through Gears, Sprung, and Maso. These deep dives gave us 3 absolutely fundamental truths about our biology that just weren't known before. Can you summarize those core takeaways for us?
Absolutely. This whole journey, from ancient guesswork to hard data, involved many steps and theories along the way. We touched on Hartley's vibrations, Purkinje's blood flow ideas, Brown-Séquard seeing sleep as active. It was a long evolution. But these 3 experiments we focused on were the critical turning points that really established the biological clock as a scientific reality. So the 3 big truths are: 1, our bodies follow predictable 24-hour cycles. Years back in 1842 gave us the first proof with his temperature measurements. He showed our physiology isn't random, it follows measurable rhythmic laws. The birth certificate of chronobiology, really.
Right, predictable cycles, got it.
2, multiple physiological systems operate in perfect coordination. Sprung in 1851 proved this. His double wave of synchronized temperature and heart rate showed our body systems work together like an orchestra, not as soloists. He pointed strongly towards a central conductor, an internal clock.
Okay, synchronized systems. Makes sense.
And 3, these rhythms represent powerful biological forces that resist override. Maso's dramatic 1887 experiment hammered this home. His fever, after just 4 days of trying to invert his schedule, proved these rhythms are fundamental constraints. You can't just ignore them or bully them with willpower without paying a price. They have real biological force.
Predictable cycles, synchronized systems, and powerful resistance. That's a really clear picture. And it connects so directly to today, doesn't it? This history explains why things like the Pomodoro technique, those short bursts of work followed by breaks, actually feel good and work well. They mimic our natural ultradian rhythms of focus and rest, which Sprung's work hinted at. It also explains why chronic shift work is linked to so many health problems. It's a constant battle against the clock. Maso demonstrated we can't easily win with impunity. So for you listening, understanding this isn't just history, it's the key to working with your own biology. Recognizing your energy peaks and troughs, respecting your need for rest. That's how you master focus and energy in our crazy modern world. It's about using the blueprint, not fighting it.
And that leads to a really important question for all of us to think about now. If Masso's body reacted so strongly, with fever, just from trying to invert his schedule for a few days, what are the implications of our modern tendency to constantly override or simply ignore our rhythms? Think about it. Pushing through fatigue with caffeine day after day, pulling all-nighters for deadlines, working right through those natural energy dips instead of taking a break. What's the cumulative physiological cost of that constant low-level war against our own internal clocks? Are we creating our own chronic febrile state without even realizing it?
That's a powerful thought to end on. What is the cost of ignoring this fundamental biology? Something to definitely ponder.
Wow, what an incredible deep dive into how we even discovered we have a biological clock. From ancient guesses to Geer's thermometer, Sprung's synchronized waves, and Masso's dramatic self-experiment. It's a fantastic story. These pioneers really changed everything, revealing the invisible forces that shape our daily energy and focus. And our exploration is just beginning. In Chapter 2, our next deep dive, we're going to look at the really stark consequences of disrupting these rhythms. We'll uncover Marie de Menessien's shocking finding that sleep deprivation can actually kill faster than starvation.
That's right. And we'll also examine how fatigue systematically takes apart our ability to think, based on Patrick and Gilbert's early studies. It's pretty sobering stuff, but crucial for understanding our limits.
Absolutely essential. So to learn more about the Ultradian Pulse, find extra resources, and see a timeline of all these discoveries, head over to ultradianflow.com. If you found this journey into the past insightful, please do like, subscribe, and maybe hit that notification bell so you don't miss our future deep dives. Thanks so much for joining us today. We'll be back soon with more insights on mastering your focus in the next deep dive of the Ultradian Pulse.
Shooting star, I'm without a safety net.